Hello. Hi. Welcome or welcome back to the Authentically Attuned podcast, also known as the AA podcast. And I'm your host, Esther. You may or may not know that already. If this is your first time tuning in, hello, welcome. And if you are tuning back in, welcome back. I'm just going to get right into this because I'm sure you read the title if you clicked on this episode. And yeah, we're going to be talking about DL men. I feel like that is the topic of the year, or at least the past couple of months. And I have been itching and scratching to talk about this, but I've been hesitating mainly because I see that it's a really sensitive topic and I wasn't sure why. So I had to do my own research, and I think I understand why it's a sensitive topic, and I want to respect that. So with that being said, I just want to start this off by saying that I'm going to be speaking from my experience. As always, my experience, my opinion. I created this podcast as a space for me to share my thoughts with the world. So that's what I'm going to be doing when I'm talking about DL men. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the term DL, it means down low, and I'm not sure if there is an official dictionary term for this. Actually, let me look it up right now. Okay, so I looked it up. I Googled define DL men. Definition says men who identify as heterosexual but engage in same-sex sexual activity while keeping it hidden from their family, friends, or community. And then the Wikipedia definition says it's a sexual slang, and the definition says a sexual subculture of men who usually identify as heterosexual but actively seek sexual encounters and relations with other men. So honestly, I would say that this definition is very on point, and it fits my definition, my personal definition of it from my experience. I think I just want to expand a little bit because it is kind of vague. So from my experience, basically what I have seen, maybe I should start off by saying that I personally feel like I was in a relationship with a man who I would describe as DL. I was with this man for almost 4 years, 3 years and 10 months, and I experienced a lot with him, and I learned a lot about men through this relationship. This was my first, I would say, committed relationship. Before that, I dated and talked to men, interacted with men, but this was my first time being in a long-term relationship, committed with a man, and we even lived together for a little bit over a year. And so this experience completely changed my perspective on sexual orientation, sexual identity, and everything. It helped me see that it really isn't as black and white as I thought it was. And by it, I mean like gender identity, sexual orientation. But basically, it changed my perspective on what a gay man, straight man looks and acts like. What I thought that was, I don't think is necessarily true. And I feel like a lot of women in society were conditioned to see a certain set of behaviors and traits as gay when it comes from a man, and a certain set of behaviors and traits as straight and masculine when it comes to men. And I've come to see that this is really, I don't know if propaganda is the right word, but like, it's lies. So, in my opinion, I don't believe that whether a man is down low or in the closet always necessarily has to do with the fact that he desires a relationship with a man, or that he is suppressing the desire and the need to date or marry or openly be with another man. There's so much I could say about why I don't think that's the case and why I came to that conclusion, but that's not what this episode is about. So, moving on. I believe that a man who is down low, so who is openly dating and seeking out relationships with women, or presenting himself as a heterosexual man, but is sleeping with or seeking sexual encounters with men in private, I believe that this type of man does this not because he's gay secretly and is avoiding coming out of the closet as gay, but because he hates women. I think that this man probably, like, his true sexual identity is probably asexual. So, like, he probably doesn't actually feel sexual attraction or desire to people, like, period. But, okay, I'm not going to get too far into that tangent. But basically, I think the core of a man who is down low and dates women and presents himself as a heterosexual man is that he hates women and doesn't know how to connect with women, doesn't understand women, has resentments towards women, and I believe that most of them, if not all, it stems from a broken relationship with their mothers. So that could be a whole episode on its own, and it most likely will be. But yes, I truly believe that it all does stem from their relationships with their mother, whether or not they were able to build a healthy bond with her, whether or not she was I wouldn't say a good example of a woman, but I would say a proper role model to show what a healthy relationship with a woman outside of sex, not sexually or intimately, what a healthy relationship with a woman would look like, what a healthy woman would look like. And I believe that it's so intense. So usually they're emasculated by their mothers. Their mothers like dominate them, whether emotionally, like physically even. And a lot of the times their mothers emotionally enmesh them. Like, there's this term, I think it's called emotional incest. I'm not going to lie, I don't have anything written. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head. And speaking, very candidly right now. But yeah, emotional incest, I think, is the term where their mothers create like a really twisted, relationship where they cross boundaries. And so I believe these men become confused and ultimately are afraid of women and distrustful of women, like, and see all women as like a replica of their mothers, basically. And I went through a lot, okay? In those 3 years and 10 months and 2 weeks, I went through a lot with this man. And the biggest issue we dealt with throughout our entire relationship was his mother. Like, triangulation is a completely different episode as well that I will talk about, but like this whole thing where there's like the monster-in-law, the mother-in-law that's like super evil and engaged, like this is such a common trait. And if you connect the fact that the men who present as mama's boys usually do have the same tendencies and traits as the men that we would consider down low, the men we would consider sassy and things like that. Because I think that's the biggest issue right now, is we are making fun of them, we're shaming them, when in reality we should be really seeing this for what it is, and it's trauma. A lot of these men are like, they are acting like their mothers. Okay, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent about the mom thing, so let's get back on track. But yes, so I do think that is the main foundation of it, of when men date women openly but then seek sex from other men but also try to say they're heterosexual. I think it's this resentment of women, this inability to understand and bond with women, but they feel safe with men because they don't have these same like walls up, the same barrier to like emotional intimacy with men. It's very strange, and I definitely can't explain it all in this one episode. But I will be making more episodes. It would help if there are specific questions. I feel like I can explain better when I'm answering direct questions. That's one of the reasons it's been so hard for me to like actually post this episode or record it, is because I feel like I know a lot and I know what I want to say, but this is such a deep topic that honestly I could talk about this for hours. But I do not want to make this episode hours long, so I'm just going to try to cover some basics. So basically, I explained to you already what I feel like the core of down low men is, like why I feel like this happens. So now I want to talk about signs really quick. And again, there's not enough time in this one episode for me to like get into all the signs, so I'm just going to talk about the main ones. And I also want to mention that I am writing a book. So this is a very general summary of something that will probably be at least 2 chapters of my book. But my thing about the signs is I feel like there are many signs. I think one thing that's really causing a lot of commotion around this topic right now is people feeling like, why are we using things like how men dress and talk and stuff to just assume they're gay, like, and I think a lot of people use these type of signs to try to minimize it and make it seem like the people who can intuitively recognize certain things through seeing these signs are crazy or just making things up. And although I agree that there are signs that are visual, so like how men dress, how they act, I do think that could possibly be a sign that somebody is down low or dealing with some, gender or sexual orientation identity confusion. I don't think that is the biggest signs, or that these should be very focused on. Because in my opinion, I think that those signs are the hardest to kind of spot. I think you actually do have to be intuitive, like very in touch with yourself and very willing to not trust the world's opinion over your own gut feeling to pick up on those signs. So that's why I don't think it's very productive to kind of like mainly highlight, oh, this is the way you tell a man is DL because he dresses like this, or he talks like this, or walks like that. I think that's unproductive, even though it is true that you can tell in that way if you are attuned enough to yourself and to the world. I think that a better way to gauge this, and one of the biggest signs that I missed, and this is why this is the only sign I'm going to mention in this episode, although there are many more signs that I'm going to be talking about in my book and in future episodes. In this specific episode, the only sign that I want to highlight is how men talk about women. So this is the biggest red flag that I feel like I completely overlooked, and it was just like a huge giant waving flag in my face from the very beginning of the relationship. And there are two reasons why I feel like I overlooked this sign. So, like I said, the sign is how he talks about women. You could tell a lot about whether a man is actually heterosexual, meaning seeking to be in a long-term relationship with a woman, loves women, or not, by how he talks about women. There are many conversations that we all have. It's actually very common nowadays as men and women for us to engage in these topics about relationships, about gender, and certain things. And I think as women, we have been conditioned to overlook when men speak negatively about women. Like, we have been completely conditioned to feel like it's normal for a man to have negative opinions on women, or like say certain things like, whore, call women certain names, and like sexually openly degrade women in front of us, other women. If they're not talking about us specifically, we're okay with it. So, like, for an example of this is in my relationship with my ex. One of the biggest issues we barely argued in the beginning. For the first 7 months, we barely argued. But when we did have back and forths or heated debates, it was about topics about dating, like these Kevin Samuel videos and these Instagram rage bait topic videos about whether 50-50 split, or women expecting men to pay all their bills, and all these things. We would get into very heated topics, arguments basically about these topics. And it got to the point where I eventually said, I don't think we should talk about these things because it doesn't make sense. This is not issues we're having in our relationship, but it really bothers me that we fight and we have such opposite opinions about some of these topics. And especially the 50-50 topic. This is my theory, but that will tell you a lot about a man. That conversation, how he responds to it, how he talks about money and providing for women financially, will tell you a lot about a man. And it's not to say that my opinion is that, men should pay all women's bills. I think the topic is not so black and white. But how a man approaches that conversation with you will show you a lot about his mindset towards women. Whether he resents the idea of being a man and taking leadership roles on in that way, whether he is trying to, project onto you that you should not expect this from him. All of these things will tell you whether or not this is a man that truly respects and sees women as human, And so that is the biggest red flag that I would say, the biggest sign is how men talk about women. And I think that's why nowadays we're seeing such a big rise in women saying that dating sucks and men are this, men are so sassy, men want princess treatment. All of this stuff is, we need to take that serious. These men are straight up telling us how they view women, what they think about women as a whole. And we're just overlooking it because we feel like that's normal for a man to think like that. Why do we think that that's normal for a man to think like that? And why are we seeking still to try to date a man like this, or be even around men like this, give them our energy, attention, anything? And I also feel like that is probably one of the best ways to tell whether a man is DL or has a secret resentment or hate for women is just to see how he approaches topics about women. Because that's one thing that I've noticed is the reason why I think this is such a important sign is because it's hard to fake this. Men can fake everything else. Like, our standards for masculinity is like, oh, he buys me flowers, he pulls out the chair, opens my door for me, oh, he's such a great guy. Certain things like that. Men can fake that. They can pretend. In the same way that women can finesse men and make them think that, you know, they love them by batting our eyelashes and, you know, showing cleavage, touching him when laughing, certain things like that. Men, like, everyone can pretend these things. But when it comes to mindset about certain things, it's hard to fake that. And if you're truly attuned to yourself, even if somebody tried to fake this type of mindset, you would be able to tell much easier than if you base it on whether he buys you flowers or calls you every time he said he's going to call you, texts you quickly. Like, you can pick up on these things better. So I think it's really about knowing the questions to ask and knowing the mindset that a healthy masculine man would have towards women, and being able to gauge whether the man that you're speaking to has this or not. Okay, so the next thing I want to touch on is the topic of whether or not you as a woman are homophobic or anti-gay or whatever if you do not want to date DL men. I'm going to make a whole nother episode about this because I've been just noticing how strange it is that a lot of women who claim to be straight have issues with people talking about DL men or quote unquote exposing DL men. We have issues with this. So I'm addressing this because I feel like it's strange that you would, as a woman, would be seen as homophobic or anti-gay for not wanting to date a man that's DL and or down low in the closet, whatever. And I would say that I think this is really strange because, again, down low or DL is men who are essentially lying about their orientation, sexual identity, whatever, saying that they are straight and are seeking sex from men behind their partners' backs. So this is like saying, why would you not want to date a serial cheater? I do not get this. And so I personally I don't feel like it's a homophobic or anti-gay for a woman to not want to date a man who's down low. I think the topic of women not wanting to date bisexual men, openly bisexual men, is something completely different. That I disagree with. I think if as long as the man is honest about him desiring men as well, that's fair. The woman then gets to choose whether or not she wants to continue to be in a relationship with this man. And that's her choice. I think it's preference. I don't really think it's fair to judge a woman for not wanting to date bisexual men either. But that's just my opinion. But I definitely don't think it makes sense to judge a woman for not wanting to date a man that is down low, that is literally lying and essentially cheating on her, like, repeatedly, and due to his ego and his fear. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say on that for now. Like I said, next episode I am gonna talk about this topic in depth because I've had an experience with a content creator who I guess is a heterosexual woman. I'm not sure, but she deleted my comment on one of her videos where she's talking about down low men. So stay tuned for that. The last thing I'm going to touch on in this episode is how to avoid dating down low men, DL men. So I already talked about the biggest sign that will help you spot them, but now I'm truly going to address how to avoid it. And I think there's only two ways to avoid this. And the first way is you have to be honest with yourself. Because truly, this is again a whole nother topic, but I believe that the women who fall for this easiest are the women who low-key deep down are down low themselves. And that's another, like, I'm gonna make a whole video about down low women, because I feel like there's a whole subculture as well of women who resent and hate men but yet seek and date them, but truly want to date women. But anyways, or like they want to be the man in a relationship. But I think being attuned with yourself, which is one of the main reasons why I named this podcast Authentically Attuned, is because I had to go through this process myself. I understand that I was only able to attract a man like my ex and be with him for so long because I personally was not in touch with myself. I didn't trust my intuition. I didn't trust that, as a woman, I am born already and I know like who I am and what I need to do. I don't need to listen to society to tell me like how I should live my life. So I didn't trust that. And so it was easier for me to ignore very obvious signs. So I think as long as you are out of tune with yourself, it will be easier to attract and to get into relationships with men like this. So that's number one. I think the biggest way to avoid getting into a relationship with a man like this, or even meeting them, is to be attuned with yourself and truly understand what are your standards for masculinity. Like, what is the type of man that you want? What will you stand for? What will you not stand for? And don't consider society's standards. Go by like what makes you feel good and what makes you feel bad. Because for sure, if we were honest with ourselves as women, it makes us feel bad when men in front of us talk negatively about women as a whole, especially in a very derogatory way. So, which brings me to the next thing that you can do to avoid meeting men like this is listen. When a man says something, and I've heard sayings like this when it's like, oh, when somebody tells you who they are, listen, basically don't let them tell you twice kind of thing. This is very true when it comes to how men talk about women, how he talks about providing for women, how he talks about caring for women, loving women, buying women flowers, certain things like this, how if he says things like women shouldn't be coddled, and like, just consider this. I'm not saying judge him like he's the worst person. He has his reasons for having these thoughts and these opinions towards women, but understand that you cannot change that. And even if you can, it will take years, and you will most likely have to endure a lot of his trauma projected onto you until that change occurs. So truly listening to what they're saying and how they feel about women is the best thing you can do for yourself when interacting with a man. Because another thing I will say, it doesn't have to do with you being perfect. So if you're you're talking to a man and he says, oh my gosh, this girl, my ex was a whore or whatever. A lot of the times I know it's easy to say like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe she really did him wrong. Maybe she deserves to be talked about like this. And I don't know, like maybe he doesn't feel like this about all women. That's not the point. What you should really look into is the fact that he obviously is not healed. He's not over this. He has some sort of resentment towards, it could be towards her as a woman, or it could be towards women in general, which is why it was so easy for him to come to that conclusion of her based off of whatever she did to him. So, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. I really hope it does, but I think truly listening to men when they talk about women, and not feeling like you need to give him grace for his opinions and thoughts about women, whether it's a specific woman or women in general. Take note of how he views women, and especially when it comes to sex, money, and beauty, like attraction, attention from men. Because at the very least, you might, once, if you take note of this, you might just come to the conclusion that he's a very insecure man. It doesn't necessarily have to mean he's down low and he hates women or he's gay or whatever. It could just mean he's very insecure. Either way, it's not worth the risk. Because that's what I learned with my ex. Because I think in the very beginning, I heard these things that he was saying, and I concluded that, oh, maybe he's just really insecure. And it took, 2.5 years for me to see that there's more. This insecurity is attached to a lot of other traumas. This insecurity is a symptom of a lot of deep traumas. And it's just not worth the risk. If I could go back in time, and even if I saw it as insecurity still, knowing what I know now, I would still not have pursued that interaction or the relationship with him. So yeah, I'm not really sure if there's anything else that I want to touch on when it comes to this, but if there is, I will just put it in another episode. This felt really good to get out. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this. I hope it clarified some things. I really hope it confirmed and verified someone's gut feeling out there. Girl, man, I don't know who you are, but I hope that you got some peace from hearing that you're not alone and that this is real. This is really happening in the world, and even better, that there's actually things you can do to protect yourself from ever experiencing anything like this again. So yeah, like I said, I hope I covered everything. At least anything that was like really, I hope I covered all the really important things for now. And if there's anything I missed or anything that you would like me to talk more in depth about in another episode, please feel free to leave me a comment. Follow me on Instagram at Xtraxen, Xtraxen. You can DM me on there, or you can also follow me on TikTok at thefemininefacade. So I'm not gonna spell that out. I'm gonna put it in the description of this episode, The Feminine Facade. And I also have another TikTok page called Behind His Mask. I have a lot going on. But yeah, shoot me a comment, a DM, an email if you have any questions about this episode, and you want me to talk more in depth about something like I said, and I will do that. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I definitely enjoyed talking about this topic, and I will talk to you in my next episode. Bye.